Thank you everyone for taking the time on a Saturday afternoon, sort of cloudy, sunny, making the best of it, dreaming about boating. I'm Jeff Cote with Pacific Yacht Systems, and today we're here to talk about batteries, marine batteries specifically, batteries for your boat. A little bit about myself. Some of you might know me, some of you don't. I'm very passionate about boating. My background, I'm an owner-operator of Pacific Yacht Systems, and I've taken sort of my life philosophy is applying what I learned in school and through my earlier days being an engineer, and applying that same philosophy to boating. And I do that for one reason. I just try to avoid surprises, and I like to have a reliable boat. I think all of us can relate to that when we're out boating, we want to be boating and enjoying what's outside, enjoying the people of loved ones, the destinations, and the last thing we need to worry about is the electrical systems on our boat. And so taking a sort of a standardized approach as opposed to applying what is often too commonly used, which is hope. I hope things are going to work out for me. Let's try to avoid using hope and using sort of a systematic approach. And that's what we're going to be talking about through the slides. Quickly, we're very fortunate to write 2 monthly columns, one in Pacific Yachting or Northwest Yachting. If you're looking for geeking out, as I say, and curious about all these topics, you can find all of those articles on our website. So every single article we've written for the last 10 years, or almost 10 years, are on our website, and you can download them as HTML or PDF. So even if you don't have a subscription to those magazines, you can reach out, and we've written dozens of articles on batteries, and you can find all of those articles online. Yes, I am a boater, and that's why it explains my passion for all of this. It's very important for me to share with you sort of the tips and tricks that I've learned being a boater and being on the water, right? Because reliability is everything. And so today what I'm here to share with you is the experiences of being a boater myself and also running a business that specializes only in marine electrical electronics. So a little bit about our business quickly. The background is we're specialized. And so my philosophy when we started this business over 12 years ago was expertise through repetition, and that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. We do a lot of work on boats. We're blessed with many of you inviting us to work on your boat. And what we learn working on boats is how we get better at doing it. I'm a big believer that you can't be on the sideline and not play golf and be a golf expert. It's really hard with boating to know everything about it. Certainly I don't. And I think practice eventually doesn't make perfect, but it avoids repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And that's going to apply today to what I'm going to be sharing with you about batteries. And lastly, a shout out to a little bit of YouTube. If you're curious and you want to learn more about topics related to marine electrical or electronics, we've got over 150 videos on YouTube. And we don't have any advertisement on YouTube. Decided to not do that. And so if you watch and you want to binge out, you can binge out to your heart's content and watch as many videos as you want, and you won't get interrupted with advertisements. So this is a little bit of a picture that's showing what's possible with marine batteries. And the takeaway from this image is there's a lot of choice, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. How are you going to choose a battery for your boat? I think all of us would agree that batteries on a boat are pretty important. You can't really have a good boating experience without having reliable batteries, right? I think that's important. Everything runs pretty much on batteries. Your refrigeration runs on batteries, the starting of the engine is off batteries, your lights, a water pump, and then from there it's sort of, there's no end. You can have TV, radar, chart plotters, it could be sat TV system, it could be a cell booster. There's endless things that you can do with power, but at the very least most of us will want to start an engine, because most of us have an engine. Most of us are going to want to have refrigeration on board, right? Very, very few of us do not have refrigeration on board. And then lastly, some lights, and including navigation lights, right? So that at the heart is the essential things that we do with power. And what we're going to be talking about right now is how do we meet those at least essential demands and more? And how do you choose batteries for your boat? So all of us are probably familiar with this concept of a cranking battery. We have one in our cars. I mean, that's how the engine gets started, is we have starter batteries, cranking batteries, right? And when you think about a starting battery, think about a sprinter, someone that can run a very short distance at a very fast rate. right? So a 100-meter dash. And that's what a cranking battery is. I mean, you're not starting your starter for 40, 50 seconds. You're starting it, and hopefully, if everything's good, it's going to light up and it's going to start rather quickly. 5 seconds. Some engines take longer, but it's a short burst of energy, but it's a high demand of energy. Some starters draw 800 amps, 300 amps, right? This is a lot of current going from your battery to actually turn the engine over. And once it's turned over, you let go the starter, right? And then the engine's on its own and it's doing its thing. But to get that engine turning, you need power. So starting battery is built for that. Now, what's essential here, and I want a big takeaway, and I see this all the time, and it's unfortunate, starter batteries are going to be half the price of a deep cycle battery. So if someone goes to a battery shop, sees a battery, and it's the right size battery, and we're going to talk about that, and it might be an 8D, a Group 31, sees a battery, and there's a price for a starter battery and a price for a deep cycle battery, and too often, some boaters are going to end up using a starter battery for a deep cycle application. And the reason was cost. You know, they're tired of spending money. I mean, we all have that feeling as boat owners, right? I mean, it's a lot, generally it's more expensive or more money than we thought to own a boat, and you're trying to reduce your costs. But if you ever run a starter battery in a deep cycle application, that battery will die very quickly, and the death is not a slow death. All too common, I was emphasizing yesterday in another presentation, we'll get a call, probably 2 dozen to 1 dozen calls a year of batteries that exploded, literally exploded. And when I mean an explosion, I don't mean a firecracker. I mean tear a hatch off the back of a deck, literally hinges removed, gone from a battery exploding. And generally when we get invited on board, what we'll find out it's a starter battery that's been used in a deep cycle application. So as a boater, I encourage all of you to be curious. And remember, hope has no place on a boat. So just check, see if your battery is a starter battery, and if it is a starter battery, is it used in a starter application or a deep cycle application? Because the previous owner, unless you bought a boat and it's a brand new boat, some previous owners are tempted to cut corners to reduce costs. And they don't do this intentionally. They don't know that this is going to happen. Nobody's malicious, but it does happen. So remember, starter batteries are not meant for deep cycle applications. Here's an example of a flooded lead acid battery, and you notice there's actually caps on top of the battery, right? So when we're talking about lead acid batteries, these are batteries that you should maintain, and a maintenance-free flooded lead acid battery is a marketing gimmick. It's impossible. There's no such thing. The marketing department that did it was probably laughing. What they meant to say is forego maintenance deep cycle battery, meaning we'll sell batteries more frequently, but there is no such thing as a maintenance-free flooded lead acid battery. Not deep cycle, it's impossible. It just means that when your battery dies, you have no way of rescuing it, because you need to water a deep cycle battery. There's just no way around it. You absolutely need to water a deep cycle battery. And when I mean water, I mean distilled water, right? And it's pretty tricky to make sure that you don't overfill the battery. And I see this all too often, right? As a boat owner, the batteries are not always accessible. They're not counter height. They're not on a workbench, with lots of light in a nice indoor heated garage, and you've got lots of lights and illumination to see inside. When you take off a battery cap, you can't see inside. So you got to take a flashlight, check where the water level is, and then if you don't read and you just fill the battery right to the top, you're going to be in a world of hurt. A world of hurt. You need to have an air gap in that battery. And so I cautiously always slightly fill it a little bit less, because if you fill it too much, when the battery is recharging, especially after a deep discharge, you'll actually have electrolyte, battery acid, coming out through the vent caps. And then that battery acid is going to land on top of the battery, and when there's enough of it, it's going to go down to the bottom of the battery box. I've seen some boaters have 2 inches of sulfuric acid at the bottom of the battery box. Years ago, we had an accountant in our company was questioning the sanity of one of my technicians that had bought over $60 worth of baking soda at a grocery store, wondering why in God's world would a technician need to buy $60 worth of baking soda at a grocery store? And it was because we need to remove the batteries, but before doing so, we had to neutralize the battery acid. Right? The battery acid was everywhere in the battery box, and since baking soda is a base, not to bore you, the opposite of an acid, we were dumping so much baking soda to neutralize that base in the battery box before we could remove the batteries. So you want to fill your battery, but not overfill. And if you have a deep cycle battery that is maintenance free, you got scammed. You really got scammed. It's a marketing thing. It's no such thing. Deep cycle, what does deep cycle mean? To me, it makes sense, but to maybe many of us, what is a deep cycle? Deep cycle is a marathon runner. Slow amount of discharge, right? So it's like walking, light jog, but for a long period of time, right? Running lights in your boat, running a refrigerator, running a water pump, comes in on and off. But it's not a heavy, intense load. Like a heavy, intense load would be a thruster. Running a large AC appliance on an inverter, right? All those are large loads, but they're very short duration. Deep cycle means some boaters will run their boat for 4 or 5 days without having another charge, right? The sailboaters do this all the time. You know, they say, Jeff, I want to be at an anchor, and I want to be at an anchor for 3 days. So for 3 days, that battery, without the engine running, is going to slowly discharge, right? And then they're going to start the engine, leave the anchorage, and then repeat again at the next anchorage. So that's what a deep cycle battery does. It runs what we commonly call your house loads, right? Things that are not used to running the engine. And the unit of measure on how you go about buying a deep cycle battery is called an amp hour. When you buy a starter battery, I didn't mention that, it was on the slide, it's called cold cranking amps, right? The ability for the battery to give, at cold temperature, how many amps can it give for a short duration of time. So cold cranking amps is for starting batteries, amp hours is for deep cycle batteries. 2 units of measure for 2 different things. So when you're looking at a flooded lead acid battery, you've got a few choices. First of all, you either buy a starter battery, deep cycle battery, or a dual purpose battery. Dual purpose battery is what it says. It does a little bit of starter, a little bit of deep cycle, but like an all-season tire, it's not the best tire. You know, like if you actually are driving in winter conditions, where I was born, certainly we had real winters, no one would have an all-winter tire in a real winter situation. Just you could, but it's better to have 2 sets of tires. And for your boat, it's way better to buy a starter battery for starter and a house battery or deep cycle battery for deep cycle application. Now, if you've got a 20-footer and you've got a Grady White or Boston Whaler, a small boat, and you're maybe using, yeah, that might make sense. But if you actually have, starting around 25, 30 feet, it's going to make sense to have deep cycle batteries for your house and a starter battery for your engine. Divide and conquer. Give your boat the best batteries they can have for the right application. Now, lead acid batteries come flooded, which is pretty common, but they also come seal valve regulated batteries. Seal valve regulated batteries in the industry, there's an acronym that's rarely used, SVR. And the first SVR battery that was commercially deployed were gel batteries. We're not going to spend too much time talking about gel because it's pretty rare. You'll hear a lot of people in marina say, hey, I have a gel battery on board. But what they actually mean to say is I have a seal valve regulated battery and my battery is an AGM battery. Because gels were the first maintenance-free batteries, seal valve regulated. A lot of boaters tell me, I have a gel. But honestly, probably only 1 out of 100 at best of us as a boater have gel batteries. You'll hear a lot of people say they have gels, but what they mean to say is they have an AGM battery. They have a seal valve regulated battery. AGM stands for absorbed glass mat battery, and it's a battery that you could literally puncture, drill a hole through, cut the bottom in half. The electrolyte is not in a liquid state. So there's nothing to top off, there's no maintenance, it can't leak, right? And prior to lithium, they were actually used in aviation. So all of the airlines, including Boeing, would have AGM batteries on board because you could actually install them in any sort of orientation. You could install them on their side. We've done that before. They're really good with vibration, right? You didn't need a battery box, and so that's the seal valve regulated battery. I would say that probably in the marine world, over 95% of us have lead acid batteries. The question is, are they flooded or seal valve regulated? And if they're seal valve regulated, they're going to be AGM, right? Very few of us are going to have gel. If someone here has a Tierra in the room, Tierra, great builder, makes boats with gel batteries. A lot of them have gels. So generally when I get on a Tierra, I'll see gel batteries. Great batteries, but you have to design the whole system around the battery. Like lithium. You know, a drop-in replacement for lithium is very misleading. It doesn't work like that. You need to consider everything. So gel and lithium are very promising. The only drawback, beside cost, is that when you put in lithium in your boat, or gel, you have to consider other things. You know, is my charger compatible to those batteries? Will my alternator be able to charge the right charge profile for those batteries? Right? You need to just think about the big picture. And sometimes as boaters, here in the room you're curious, but a lot of us want easy. And easy is not lithium, and easy is not gel. Both of those batteries mean thinking through what are the implications of your choice. If you want easy, AGM is easy. AGM is a drop-in replacement. Of course, it can be better, but AGM is very, very, very similar to flooded lead acid battery in terms of the charging profile. Okay? Now, I do make a mention on this slide, I make a mention about a Firefly battery. Firefly battery is an AGM battery, and it's a better version. Now, we'll compare those batteries a little bit later, but yeah, you can definitely buy a Firefly battery, which is also an AGM. So, flooded lead acid batteries. Definitely the lowest cost battery you can get. So if you're looking for a low cost battery, and that's where cost is king, you cannot beat flooded lead acid battery. Stop looking, don't even worry about AGM, don't worry about gel, forget lithium. Forget lithium. If cost is king, you're going to do flooded. Now, there are a few caveats to that. Nigel Calder said in one of his presentations that flooded lead acid batteries don't die, they're murdered. And it's true. When you buy a flooded lead acid battery, you are signing a binding contract with that battery that you will maintain it and top off the battery fluids, especially for deep cycle. And if you don't, which most of us end up forgetting or delaying the maintenance, it's not that we didn't maintain, it's that I haven't gone to it yet, right? Of course I maintain my batteries. I just haven't had a chance to do it recently, but I have in the past, and I promise I will in the future. But that promise and bragging about what you did in the past and telling yourself what you're going to do in the future, the battery doesn't care. It doesn't listen. It doesn't want excuses. The moment you've exposed your battery plates to air and they've actually seen oxygen, those batteries will sulfate, and then you are in a downward spiral. You'll never win, because the batteries at that point are always going to be thirsty because they're going to sulfate. Because they've sulfated, they're going to have higher resistance. Higher resistance means they're going to be more intolerant to charging, so then you end up topping the batteries all the time. And the more of the battery plate that was exposed, the more pain you're in. So generally when your battery bank, or one cell of your battery bank is exposed, you just got to suck it up. Tell yourself, I shouldn't have done that. Replace the batteries, and tell yourself, I shall keep my promise. And so that's the downside of flooded, is it's a binding contract with that battery. Now some boaters are airline pilots. I have a few, quite a few. They're very ritualistic. If they're not ritualistic, they still wouldn't be here, right? There's a lot of check boxes and checklists you have to do when you're flying an airplane. And if they're still here, they're probably really good at flying airplanes and doing checklists. Those owners, no problem. That's what they do, lists. You know, they're ritualistic. They never forget. They can't forget. That's their job. You got to go through your checklist. But for some of us, you know, forgetting to do something, sometimes it happens. We're busy. You know, we don't remember. And that's where flooded lead acid can give you a lot of grief. The other big point and takeaway is that a flooded lead acid battery, what you see is not what you get. There's this concept that we're going to be talking a lot about. It's about the concept of a ceiling and the concept of a floor. when you see a battery that's 200 amp hours and you're thinking, oh, 200 amp hours, I can have all that energy, you can't. The top end of the battery is not usable. That's the ceiling. From 85% to 100 is not available for you really under cruising. It takes forever to recharge. And the bottom from 50% down to 0 is not to be taken, because otherwise you're going to really hurt the battery. It's going to have a very short life. And so effectively, a deep cycle battery is only used about a third of it, from 85% to 50%, right? And that's the challenge when you're thinking about purchasing a flooded lead acid batteries. What you see isn't what you have, okay? And then we'll compare that with other batteries. So the other thing to remember is that flooded lead acid batteries, like the ones we have in our cars, have a discharge, self-discharge. That's why, for example, my folks have a place in Florida, and in the summer when they're not there, someone actually ends up, a friend of them, drives a car every month for 15, 30 minutes to recharge the battery. If you leave a flooded lead acid battery for a year under no charge, that battery will be dead. All these movies that show cars starting after an apocalypse after 2 years, that is not possible. There is no such thing as a lead acid battery that's going to have a charge in 2 years. It just won't happen. If you don't recharge your battery, it will discharge. Now that is for a flooded lead acid battery, okay? So that's really important to remember. If your boat doesn't get a chronic charge or regular charge, that battery over time, let's say it's on a mooring buoy, for example, right, for 2 months, 3 months, or you have it in a garage and you can't have a charger there, then a flooded lead acid battery is not a good choice. You should consider an AGM battery. Again, this is another example of a flooded lead acid battery, and we know it's flooded because we can see some vent caps, i.e. filler caps. So you can undo those caps, look with a flashlight, have safety goggles on, fill the water level with distilled water right to the right point, not too much. Do it regularly, never forget, and that is your commitment, and that's why you got a really low-cost battery, okay? An AGM battery is generally about twice the price of a flooded lead acid battery. The electrolyte is not in a liquid state, which is great, right? We like that. It also means it's really good because it doesn't need to be topped off, one of the benefits is it doesn't gas as much. It can keep up to 5 atmospheres of pressure within the battery. And so a lot of us have our batteries in the cabin. Actually, like sailboaters, it happens a lot. There's not an engine compartment separate from the cabin space. The batteries are under a settee. A lot of us have batteries under the forward cabin, under the bunk for a thruster battery bank, right? Batteries are installed throughout the boat. So if your batteries are installed throughout the boat, a flooded lead acid battery is, when it's being recharged, is going to actually be gassing. And that gassing is not just a nuisance from the smell, it's very corrosive. So another reason why boaters end up choosing AGM is they want a battery in their cabin, right? They have no choice, that's where the batteries are. And so you end up getting an AGM battery for that reason. There's no maintenance required, which is quite handy. And they only self-discharge about 2%. Only 2% a month, which is reasonable. They do discharge, but not a lot. Now here's one of the biggest benefits of an AGM battery. The floor of an AGM battery is around 30%. So now your usable battery capacity is from 85 to 30%, right? As opposed to flooded, where it was only 35%. So when you get an AGM battery, you have 1.5 times more usable battery capacity than a flooded. And what I was showing on the other slide, and I didn't emphasize this, but I do want to do that for a second. I was saying if you want 200 amp hours of usable battery capacity, you'll need 600 amp hours. 600 amp hours with flooded, but with AGM, you can get away with only 400 amp hours. Meaning you need less batteries to do the same thing, right? 2/3 less, or 1/3 less, i.e. 2/3 of flooded, okay? So here's an example on a boat. There's actually, if you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 16 L16 AGM batteries. That'd be like 32 AGM batteries, which would be like 48 golf cart batteries. So do you see how someone can actually I mean, it'd be hard to put 48 golf cart batteries in a boat. It'd be pretty hard. You'd have to have a pretty big boat, 80-footer probably. At one point, I mean, that's a lot of wiring. So what happens is boaters are saying, I want more power, but I can't afford the space, right? So, or the weight. So what they end up doing is they go to AGM, and so that reduces the amount of batteries that they require on their boat, right? And they get AGM batteries that are higher. So again, it reduces the floor space on a boat. This is about a 60-footer. So 16, it's about 1,600 amp hours at 24 volts, which is a lot of power. The boat can be 2 days at anchor without running the generator. So Firefly batteries are another version of AGM batteries, and Firefly batteries are 12 to 16 times the battery life of a flooded lead acid battery. So when we install Firefly batteries on boaters, we always ask them, the first question I say, what's your horizon with a boat? And all of us as boaters have to ask ourselves that. Does it make sense? If you're going to sell the boat in a year, you're not going to want to spend too much money because the next owner might not perceive the same value as you do for spending all that extra money on buying a battery that is 4 times the price of a flooded lead acid battery. 4 times. So what you do is, okay, I've got a long horizon on my boat. I'm going to have my boat 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. This is my forever boat. Then I'm like, okay, forever boat, long horizon, at least 8 years, 10 years, then it might make sense to look at Firefly. Again, like an AGM battery, leak proof, you don't need a battery box, no maintenance. But what's interesting about a Firefly is you can actually bring the battery all the way down to 20% of capacity, right? So that's starting to be interesting. Now it's 65% of the battery is readily usable. That makes a big difference, 65%. So now if you want to have 200 amp hour battery bank, you can get away with only a 300 amp hour battery capacity, right? Because 65% of that battery is usable, so hence you only need 300 amp hours. So with Firefly, you can get away with literally half the amount of batteries. I have a video on YouTube where we have sort of a little mock-up, and we've got 6 flooded is equal to 4 AGM is equal to 3 Fireflies. So some boaters say, Jeff, I don't have the space on my boat for more batteries. I just don't have space. How am I going to have more power? And the way to do that is to go with Firefly. For the same amount of batteries, you would effectively double your usable battery capacity. Fireflies come in 2 different sizes. They come in group 31s and L15s. Here's an example. This is on a trawler. We installed 12 actually Firefly batteries on board. It's worth talking about because we're doing more and more lithium battery banks. Lithium battery is definitely more money than flooded. I'd say it's about a ratio of 10. So if cost is king, you're not going to do, and if that's the only thing you care about is low cost, and you're not talking about value because there is an argument for value for lithium, but just cost on its own, you're not going to do lithium. So why are boaters spending 10 times the price on lithium over a flooded lead acid battery? There's a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons is that a lithium battery will give you, for space and weight savings, massive amount of energy density. It's literally, if you buy, for example, an AD, think about an AD or the big truck batteries, right? AD batteries about this long, this wide, and about this big. You see them all the time in Grand Banks. You'll see them on Sea Rays. That's what the big rigs have. Those batteries generally weigh about 160 pounds. That battery in a flooded lead acid battery is around 240 amp hours, about. And in lithium, same battery, same weight, same dimensions, is 600 amp hours. So you're nearly tripling the amount of capacity in one battery without adding any more weight. So it's a third the weight, a third the space. Those are big savings. And some boats or boaters want to have more battery capacity, but they can't afford the space and they can't afford the weight. So you're trading off, right, weight savings and space savings with cost. The other thing too that you can't beat with lithium, of course, is the number of cycles. You know, for boaters that are going offshore and they're going to be using their boats for a long period of time, lithium has the most amount of cycles. So especially with boaters that are taking off and are going on a journey for 5 or 10 years, are going to be on their boat for every day, best value battery you can buy for sure is a lithium. No doubt lithium is the best choice because they're on their boat 365 days a year cycling those batteries. And the other thing that's incredible with lithium is that you have the ability of going all the way down to 20, but there's no ceiling on a lithium battery. So you can use from 100% to 20% of capacity is readily available. So now, literally that 600 amp hour battery bank is 80% usable. So again, you get massive savings in usable. So it's win, 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 win. It's winning across the board except the cost. The cost is one of the reasons why people would be like, it's hard. So you've got to think about how much are you using your boat. Is space and weight really important? And the other big advantage that I didn't even mention is also the ability for the lithium battery to take a high rate of charge. Lithium batteries are thirsty, meaning that you can pretty much throw anything you want at them for a charge rate and they will take it. So it means it reduces your charge time. And that's another variable why boaters are considering lithium. Okay? A lot of choice. To recap, flooded lead acid batteries, gel lead acid batteries, AGM lead acid, Firefly lead acid batteries, and then lithium. Those are your choices when you're shopping for battery. And remember, if you're doing flooded lead acid, you're buying that battery either as a starter battery, a deep cycle battery, or a dual purpose battery. And don't just look at the price on the battery because you might end up buying the wrong battery for your application. So now that we've talked about the different type of choices that you have in selecting a battery, the first one is, and people ask me all the time, is Jeff, how do I size my battery bank? Well, a little bit like sort of planning for your retirement. How much money you need to retire is a function of how much money you spend. Right? Some people are pretty Luddites. They don't spend a lot of money. Some other boaters use a lot of power. Other boaters use almost none. Right? So the first step for all of us as boaters is to figure out what is our daily power need on our boat. Okay? And remember that the power consumption on your boat is generally going to vary depending on the seasons. Here in the Pacific Northwest, how much power you use in the summer is going to be different than how much power you use on the shoulder season or in the winter. Right? In the winter, if you're on your boat, you're probably going to have a heater. The lights are going to be turned on earlier in the day. In the summer, you've no heat. The lights are almost never need to be turned on. I mean, it's bright from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. So those factors come into play. So think about what your power consumption is in the summer versus the shoulder season versus the winter. So the other thing I'm trying to express or show is that amp hours really vary from boat to boat and also from user to user. Like I say, we have an opportunity at Pacific Yacht Systems to be invited to work on about 1,000 boats a year. And I got to work our outfit on a lot of Grand Banks. Probably done 100 Grand Banks 42. I can tell you there's no such thing as a Grand Banks 42 battery bank system. It's all different. Some owners only have one 8D and some owners have almost 6 8Ds. Right? It depends. Some people, don't have a deep freezer on top. They run the fridge. They barely run the fridge. They don't even use the freezer. Right? Some people never turn on the lights. Some people are Luddites. And some other boaters want to watch TV. The lights are on. The inverter is on all of the time. They've got heat on. So there's a huge diversity or difference between one Grand Banks 42 owner to another Grand Banks 42 owner. So don't think, oh, I've got a neighbor, he's got the same boat as I do. How many batteries does he need is what I need. It depends what he's doing with the boat. That's what makes battery selection so hard, because all of us are using batteries differently, even on the same boat. These numbers are giving you an indication. Like if we think about in our world, with our currency, let's say in North America, what is 100,000 a year? We know what that means. We know if someone's making $1 million a year. We know if someone's making $20,000 a year, right? Those numbers mean something to us. With amp hours, you can see on the low end, a really low-end amp hour consumption is probably going to be around 50, 60 amp hours a day is probably the lowest you'll see. Now, of course, there are examples. If you don't have refrigeration on your boat, you're even much lower than that. But the moment you have refrigeration on your boat, you're using power. It's sort of like having a mortgage. In the Pacific Northwest, Seattle or Vancouver, it's hard to have a mortgage and say that you've got too much money. It's kind of hard. Mortgage is probably one of the largest draws, you know, as a proportion of your income. And the moment you have refrigeration on your boat, you're going to be using a lot of power. It's just the way it is. The bigger the boat, the more refrigeration you have. You have 2 fridges, full-size fridge up top, fridge down below. You've got a wine cooler. You got an ice maker, right? So you're just having more refrigeration. But here are numbers from about 85 to about 500 amp hours is within the land of the reasonable at 12 volts. Now, I've been on a boat where it's a 24 volt boat, and they were using 800 amp hours a day. Now, it was an 85 footer, and it was a no compromise boat. They don't make selections. They don't worry about stuff. They're running, you know, high-end appliances on their inverter bank system all the time. But those are outliers. For the rest of us, you know, it's going to be 100, 200, 300, maybe 500 amp hours. But it's not going to be like, not most of us don't need $1 million a year to live. You know, 100,000 can give you a comfortable sort of lifestyle, right? And with batteries, they're a limited commodity. Even if you can afford more batteries, where are you going to put them? There's weight implications, space implications. How are you going to recharge those batteries, right? So you can't just say, well, I'm just going to have more batteries. Well, then how are you going to recharge those batteries, right? So being conservative with power is one of the best sort of advices that we give boaters, because you can't just solve this problem by throwing money at it, right? You just can't. So here's an example of a boat we did recently. That's an 85 footer. And it's got 12 L15 batteries wired in series. Each battery is only 2 volts. And so we wired 12 of them in series to make a 24 volt bank. So when you end up choosing a battery bank and you're trying to figure out the size of the battery bank, you got to know what your daily amp hour budget is. That's one thing. And if you don't know what that is, you can come and ask me at the end of the class. I'll give you, if you tell me how you use your boat, what kind of boat it is, I'll be able to guess. Or if you have a battery monitor on your boat, you can actually figure that out because it's a counter. It's going to tell you, like, what is your burn rate. You can look at it. Start at noon, the next day at noon, how many amp hours did you take? Over time, take that averaging number and you'll know what your burn rate is. But besides knowing what your daily amp hour consumption is, you got to ask yourself, how frequently am I going to recharge my batteries, right? Sailboaters is a prime example. Many sailboaters don't have a generator. They have an engine, they have an alternator, but maybe some of them want to stay on the hook, away from the dock, for 2 days, 3 days. It's not uncommon. So for them, their battery bank has to be 3 times or 2 times their daily amp hour. So if, for example, they have a 200 amp hour budget and they want to be on the hook for 2 days, they're going to need 400 amp hours of usable battery capacity to stay at the hook for 2 days. Now here's where it gets interesting. Remember, there's a difference between, and this is key, there's a difference between usable amp hours and nominal amp hours, right? Remember what we talked about a little bit earlier? We said a flooded lead acid battery has only 35% of usable power between the ceiling of 85 and the floor of 50. And with AGM, you can go to 30. With Firefly, you can go to 20. And with lithium, you can go from 100 to 20, right? So all of them have more different ratios of what you see is what you get. And so here in the next slide, I'm showing and I'm recapping a flooded battery has a floor of 50, an AGM has a floor of 30, a Firefly has a floor of 20, and so does a lithium. Lithium is even better because what they do is there's no ceiling. The ceiling doesn't start at 85, it starts at 100. And this is why when boaters come aboard the boats that we've done an electrical system for, they always think that our battery banks are oversized. They're like, well, this is crazy, you have too many batteries. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Well, first of all, I don't want my boater to change their batteries every second year, like a lot of us end up doing. Because if you take your battery and you work them hard and you take them from 100% till the lights stop working or the fridge stop working, those batteries will give you only 50 cycles. 50 cycles. And generally in the Pacific Northwest, that's 25 days a year is a good amount of time on the hook, right? 30 days of usage of your boat, right? 30 overnights. You end up having only 2 years with your batteries. If you want to have 300 cycles, you have to stop at 50%. And so it's essential to not work your battery all the way down till the lights stop working. You can do that, but you'll end up buying batteries more frequently. That's why there's a floor on the use of a battery. So the usability chart for a battery is flooded a third, AGM 55%, Firefly is 65%, and lithium is 80%. You see, there's a reason to all this madness. Again, if you go in a battery shop and you just look at prices, you're like, well, this is stupid. Why would I spend more money when I can buy something for less? Unfortunately, you have to be educated, right? We still flooded batteries. It's not that one is the best choice. It depends your budget, your horizon with the boat, what you do with the boat, right? Do you have space constraints? Do you have volume constraints? Do you need more power, less power? And then you end up going through this decision process and end up just getting to a battery that makes sense for you. There is no one best battery for everyone. There isn't. If there was, then I'd write an article about it, everyone would know about it, we'd be done, and we wouldn't be here trying to learn about it, okay? So here's a little chart that we created to demonstrate or summarize the differences between flooded lead acid batteries. You can see that there's a big variation on the cost. Firefly is 4 times the price of flooded. But then if you start considering the usable battery, like you need half the batteries for Firefly than you do flooded. They're maintenance free, they don't leak, you don't need a battery box, they don't vent. All those are good arguments, and that's why I would say probably 5% of our owners do lithium, 80%, 75% do AGM, Firefly and AGM, and then about 20% do flooded. That's for us. Another outfit somewhere else is going to see a different ratio, but there is about a 20% that do flooded lead acid batteries. Most people end up being convinced through my argument that a seal valve regulated battery or AGM battery makes more sense, just because of that maintenance component, and also how much more batteries is usable. And then about 5% end up doing lithium, okay? But it's not to say that everybody needs lithium. It depends on your boat and what you're going to end up doing with your boat. So here's another way to look at it. If you're going to buy a flooded battery, you need 3 times what you need from usable to nominal, right? So if you need 200 amp hours, you need 600. AGM gel, you need 2 times. Firefly, 1.5 times. Lithium, 1.25. And look how interesting that becomes for a battery bank, right? And that's why you can have all these savings of space and weight. Or what a lot of boaters end up doing, they don't save space or weight. They take the available space and they double, triple their battery bank in usable capacity. It's not, I have owners, power boaters that say to me, Jeff, I want to be 5 days on the hook, not running the generator, not running an alternator, not worrying about power. I want to go to the anchorage. Yes, I could run my generator, but I don't want to bother the sailboaters that are beside me. I just like quiet. Some of us like quiet. Some of us don't care. But batteries are a way of doing that, giving you that time, that quiet time, where you can run all the loads on your boat off the battery bank. So to sort of emphasize, when you're going to end up buying a battery bank on your boat, I want to reiterate, and this is key, and I had that question yesterday on the floor. A few people at the boat show stopped and were asking me some questions, and they were like, Jeff, is there such a thing? I have golf carts on my boat, but they're flooded. Can I buy them AGM? And the short answer is yes, absolutely. When you buy a battery on your boat, you have basically 3 variables. One is size, right? So is it a group 31, a group 24, a group 27, a 4D, an 8D, a golf cart? And there's different types, the slimline, L15, L16, right? All different sizes. And those sizes are known dimensions, and every manufacturer of battery is building to those specifications. So a golf cart battery from Costco, from Napa, from East Pendeca, from Lifeline, I don't care who the manufacturer are, they're all the same dimension. A golf cart battery is a golf cart battery in its physical size. Thank God, right? Otherwise, you'd be buying a golf cart battery from everyone, and the case wouldn't work, and you couldn't fit it in your battery box. So when you buy a golf cart, it's a golf cart. Now, what's inside varies. You could say, I want a golf cart AGM. I want a golf cart gel. I want a golf cart lithium. I want a golf cart flooded. You can do that. You can buy a battery in a specific size and then say, I want it to be an AGM battery. So if you have group 31 batteries on your boat or golf cart and you want to go AGM, you can keep the battery box as you have it, and just when you end up changing your batteries, change them to different chemistry. Okay? The third thing is if you buy flooded, not only are you buying a group 31, but you have to say a group 31 deep cycle or a group 31 starter, right? So there's a distinction between a deep cycle and flooded. So with really three variables: size, chemistry, application. And that's how you end up choosing the right battery for your boat. The other thing here that's really important to remember, and I can't emphasize this enough, is that when you change a battery bank size on your boat, or the previous owner changed the battery bank size and increased the size of the battery bank, unfortunately, all too commonly, the charger was not increased in size. And I can tell you that is probably, besides maintenance, the second most, not popular, but the reason for having failed batteries is having an undersized battery charger on your batteries. Not pretty much. All builders know this rule. When they size a battery bank and a charger on your boat and you buy a brand new boat, and I don't care what brand, it could be a sailboat, a powerboat, across the board, your battery charger is a minimum 10% of the deep cycle battery bank size. So if you have a 400 amp hour battery bank, you're going to have a 40 amp charger. If you had a 100 amp battery bank, you'd have a 10 amp charger. If you have a 1,000 amp hour, you have a 100 amp charger. 10%. It's a rule. It's a known rule. Again, this is where hope comes into play, and unfortunately disappoints too many of us. If you double your battery bank size and you had, for example, 2 group 31 batteries, 200 amp hours, and you change that to 4 group 31s, and your charger is a 20 amp charger, a lot of boaters say, well, what does it matter, Jeff? It's just going to take twice as long. It's not like that. Not only is it twice as long, but if you can't energize the battery at bulk, in the bulk phase, at the right rate of charge, you're not going to re-energize the whole battery bank. Now, to you and I, that day, it's going to look like a full battery. It might have gotten charged to 99%. But the next time you recharge the battery, you're not going to recharge it to 99%, you're going to recharge it to 98.1 or 99 of 99. And every time you end up recharging the battery a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. And what happens with those batteries is they end up dying, not suddenly, meaning everything was great and now suddenly is gone, but instead of, it's a slow, gradual decline to death, but a much shorter death, or sooner death than you would have wanted. So instead of your flooded acid batteries giving you 5 to 7 years, they're giving you only maybe 2 to 3 years. We often get called on a boat where the owner, it's now his third set of battery banks, right? And every 2 to 3 years he changes his batteries, and he's talking to his fellow boaters at the dock. He's like, why am I changing my batteries so often? And that's where he starts doubting that he's just not unlucky. There's something wrong, inherently wrong on his boat. And that's where we come aboard, and the first thing I end up looking for is making sure the charger was changed in size to match the new battery bank size. And all too often, it isn't. So 10% is the minimum rate of charge for a charger. Now, there is an endpoint. I had another boater that once it was at Catalina, put in a 120 amp or 160 amp alternator connected to only 2 golf cart batteries. I said to the owner, I said, I mean, great on you, kudos, huge alternator. But you know your golf cart batteries can only take a maximum, and that's a theoretical, charge rate of 25% of capacity. Those golf cart batteries, if it's a 200 amp hour battery bank, 25% of 200 is 50. Your largest alternator line rate that can go in those batteries is 50 amps. You have a 160 amp alternator. That capacity is useless. You won't, unless you triple your battery bank size, you'll never be able to use all that capacity. So there is such a thing as too big of an alternator. Everything has to work together, right? Everything has to work together. So now with lithium, they can take 3 times their capacity as a charge rate. Now that's generally a selling feature, but what the salesperson isn't telling you is that how in God's world are you gonna, let's say you have, for example, a 300 amp hour or 200 amp hour battery bank, which is not a big battery bank by any case, right? 200 amp hour is a tiny battery bank. If you have a 200 amp hour battery bank and you can charge that battery bank at 3 times capacity, that's 600 amps, where are you going to find a 600 amp charger? You cannot go to West Marine and walk in and say, I'm looking for a 600 amp charger. They're going to be like, what? The largest charger you can buy at 12 volts, period. I've never seen a bigger one, is 100 amps. Largest alternator is around 240, 260 amps. So the selling feature of a lithium battery, it's true it can take 3 times capacity, but there are no chargers or alternators that are that big to give you the benefit of that. AGM can take up to 40%. But 40% is still a big number. Think about a battery bank that is 1,000 amp hours, which is not, it's a big one, but not crazy. That's 400 amps of charge rate. That's a lot of chargers, right? And so and some owners come to me and say, Jeff, I've got a battery bank, I've got a lot of chargers, but I want to reduce my generator runtime. I want to just half it. So sometimes what we'll end up doing is take a flooded off the boat, replace them with AGM, because the AGMs can be we can push the amps inside the battery bank, and that's a way to reduce the generator runtime. But it's not extreme. We'll never go to 3C. We'll go 0.2 of C, 0.3, 40%, 30%. We'll never get to 3 times capacity. That's 300%. There's no way. It's going to be always a fraction of capacity, okay? Even though we might want to. Here's other pictures with some batteries. Over here, I'm emphasizing the importance of having battery boxes to hold especially flooded acid batteries. And we use these heavy-duty straps. So we're almost at the end, and then we're going to open the floor to questions. So before you get excited and say, oh, I'm going to get a huge battery bank on my board, I'm always I tell owners, I'm like, batteries are good, but it's sort of like having a bank account that has no limit, or a wallet that can store a lot of cash. That's good, but where are you going to earn the cash? Right? Storing of energy is one thing, and that's what a battery is. And if you're a weekend warrior and you're leaving Saturday morning and you're coming back on Sunday evening, or you're only gone for 2 days, then yeah, a battery bank is good, and you only need a charger because you'll eventually always recharge at the dock, and you're only gone for a day or 2, and you're always coming back. But if you're a cruiser, and when you're cruising on your vacation, you're gone for 4 days, 5 days, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. Some of us are lucky, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, some a years or years. Then that's where you got to ask yourself, I mean, it's one thing to have batteries, but how are you going to recharge those batteries? So I'm not going to be talking about all the different ways. We're going to talk only about a charger here, but I want to recap. I mean, what are the different ways that you can go about recharging your batteries? One is a charger, which used to be called a converter, which converts AC power to DC, right? So you go from shore power, AC, 120 or 220, you go to DC, right? That's what a charger does. We also have alternators. Alternators only charge your batteries when the engine is running, meaning the engine has to be turning. It's through the rotation of the engine that alternator is going to be outputting, and the output of that alternator is a function of your RPM. So if you're idling your engine, or you're cruising at 1400 RPM for a diesel boat because you want to save fuel, which is a really good reason, and you don't want to waste energy and i.e. money, your alternator is also going to be outputting much less than it would if you were outputting 21 or 22 or 2300 RPM. So it does happen as a boater that we're, for good reasons, are not punching our engine at 2600 RPM, right? And your alternator is not outputting what it can output because you're simply running your engine at a fraction of what, 21, 2600 RPM output would be. So alternators are a way of creating power from your engine rotating. So it does not work if you're just in the water without the engine running. And some alternators don't even output at idle. They need about 1100, 1200 RPM to actually get engaged. So you're turning your engine on, you're at 800 RPM, the alternator is not working. You rev up to 1100, then it kicks on. And the more you rev up, the higher the charge curve goes, okay? You can charge batteries with methanol fuel cells. You can charge them with solar. You'll see a lot of boats with solar. And if you're curious on any of these topics, we do some courses that are 2 days long, like about almost 16 hours. And I've divided all those videos in little chunks. So one of the series, it's 30 videos. It's a 16-hour lecture divided in 30 videos, and it's on our website. And if you're like, oh, I'm curious about solar, I want to read more about or learn or see videos, I have a section on solar, all articles about solar on that page, all videos are on that page, and then you can start geeking out and doing an hour presentation on solar, and then an hour presentation on just troubleshooting solar, and short videos on solar. So there's a lot out there. I mean, that's a good thing about boating, is it's a never-ending journey, right, for learning. I mean, it's not easy. The other thing too is DC generators. That's common. I was on a boat the other day. They had a generator, not AC, but a DC generator, so it recharges the battery directly, right, like an alternator. And then also some boaters have wind turbines, tow turbines. These are all different ways of recharging your batteries. And you got to think about that when you're a boater, because batteries eventually will be empty, and how are you going to recharge your batteries? So this is sort of all the different sources are on the left-hand side of the slide. So you can see there's solar controllers, alternators, chargers, fuel cells, wind turbine. All my schematics and stuff like that are also on the website, and they're actually in the resource section of our website. So you can download all these PDFs. And by the way, also, the presentation is going to be posted on YouTube, but it's also going to be, all the slides are going to be on our website under the media page as well. So we post all our content on the media page. So we got maybe a couple slides before we finish, and then I'm going to open the floor to questions. So the reason why a charger makes sense for you and for pretty much all of us, especially if you have the ability of either connecting to shore power or running a generator. Now, if you've got a boat, for example, and you're never connected to shore power, like in Chicago, for example, a lot of boaters have their boats on mooring balls. They never go to shore power. Battery charger is irrelevant to them. They're not connected to shore. They don't connect to shore. They don't need a battery charger. Or if they have one, they're never using it. But here in the Pacific Northwest, most of us are actually docked at a marina. Not all of us, but most of us. Or maybe stored inside a barn. Like in Vancouver, we have outdoor storage. And some owners are going to be able to plug in. And a battery charger is going to keep your batteries through a 3-phase charging cycle, bulk absorption float. And the other part too is that you can start customizing the charge profile. So if you have a lithium battery, that lithium battery is going to want a different charge profile than a flooded battery, different charge profile than an AGM battery. And so there's presets on chargers, modern chargers today, and this is going back to even 20 years. So if you've got a charger that is post-2000, it's going to have a selector somewhere that says I'm a flooded battery, I'm an AGM battery, or I'm a gel battery. Or the modern and more expensive ones, we can go in with a laptop or through sort of a remote panel, and we can actually dial it in. And I can say, I'm going to charge, I've got Firefly batteries on this boat, and I want this exact custom charge profile for the batteries. Okay? In the past, chargers used to be called converters, and they were ferro-resonant chargers. And so if you have a ferro-resonant charger and you love your boat or your batteries, I would strongly recommend removing it. They can't be left on. They'll boil your batteries, right? So converters are meant to be turned on and off. They say they can be left on, but what they mean is you need to maintain your batteries every week, because they'll actually boil over. And when you come on a boat that has a converter left on, you can actually smell, it smells like rotten egg. You've got that very, very, like it stinks. And that's generally an indication that your batteries are boiling over. And you'll hear them, like Rice Krispies. They're crackling. And that's because the charge voltage, which they used to call trickle charging, nobody uses that word anymore, is about 13.6, 13.7, which is too high. And that ends up boiling the batteries. I commonly get asked a question, and they say, Jeff, I've got a big battery bank, and I have a Magnum inverter charger, or a Victron, or a Xantrax, or Samlex, and my charger only gives me 100 amps or 60 amps. But my battery bank, you said, I need 10%. And my battery bank is bigger than 10. My battery bank is 1,200 amp hours, 1,600 amp hours. How can I recharge that battery bank if I can't buy a charger that is 160 amps? Well, the way to do that is stacking chargers. So often, especially with trawlers, people that are around 42, 48, 50, 60, 70, 80, what we'll end up doing is we'll end up stacking multiple chargers. On some boats, I'll have 300 amp chargers working in parallel to give the right amperage to meet the minimum criteria. But more than that, and that's minimum is good, but what happens even more is boaters are saying, I want to reduce my generator runtime to recharge my batteries from 8 hours to 3 hours or 2 hours. I'm tired of running my generator forever. I just can't stand it. Like, I have it, I don't mind running it 3 hours a day or twice 2 hours a day, but I don't want to run my generator for 12 hours a day. What can you do? And what we end up doing is we end up stacking chargers. We'll put a second one, a third one, and they'll run all in parallel at the same time so that the batteries can take a 300 amp charge. I had an 80 footer, we had over 300 amps at 24 volts, so that's a 600 amp charge rate on that boat. That owner was able to run his generator every other day. An 80 footer running off batteries, completely silent. It's beautiful, right? So with that, I'm going to open the floor for questions. I've got one already in the front row. I'm going to start. Let's do it. Go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about the positives and negatives of fuel cells and how well they charge?
Okay. So the question was, can I talk a little bit about the positive and negatives, the pros and cons of a methanol fuel cell and how they charge a battery? I have a methanol fuel cell on my boat. There's going to be a lot, if you want to do a popular choice, do not get a fuel cell. If you say you have a fuel cell on the dock, you're going to get a lot of hate. People don't like them because they're expensive, and therefore they can't afford one, and they're going to tell you you're stupid for having one. So that's generally what's going to happen. The second thing is they're going to say, well, it's just ridiculous. Why would you do that? Why not just run your engine forever? And I cannot tell you, it's probably one of the decisions I've taken on my boat that I've had the most opposition and pretty, like, actually strong opinions about from other boaters, that it's just stupid. Just stupid. Why would you get a methanol fuel cell? So I'll tell you, and I tell them, I'm very calm, I'm like not defensive. I'll tell, here's the reason why I did a methanol fuel cell. I did a methanol fuel cell because I don't have a generator on my boat, and if I had one, I wouldn't have gotten a methanol fuel cell. I can't put a generator on my boat. There's no space for it. I'm not going to run it in the living room. There's no closet. There's no place on my boat for a generator, and if I could fit one in, I would. That'd be one reason. Second is I like quiet. I'm a big fan of quiet. I do not like noise. Some boaters run their generator. I met a boater, no joke, he runs his generator 24/7. It's not even a big boat. It doesn't bother him. He doesn't need batteries. He's effectively running a generator that runs a charger that recharges his battery 24/7, and it's a 36-footer. I'm like, congratulations. You are so lucky. I do not have that condition. I don't like the smell of a generator. I don't like the noise of a generator. I don't like the vibration of a generator. I don't like the idea of a mechanical device on my boat running, an engine running when I'm sleeping. I'm not comfortable with those things. Because remember, on my boat, I'm my own engineer. When you have a 100-footer, 120, you start having crew, right? There are people on your boat that are running these things. So you might be sleeping on your boat, but there are more than just one person on your boat worrying about your boat. And so the great thing about a methanol fuel cell is the same sound level as a cat purring. You could never hear. You're hearing this sort of refrigeration in the background somewhere here? Like, that is 10 times louder than a methanol fuel cell. You need to hold your breath. You can't breathe to hear a methanol fuel cell. You hold your breath, and you concentrate, and you're like, oh yeah, it's on. That's one of the reasons. And the other reason is at one point as a boater, like I did everything else. I said, okay, I'm going to first do a high output alternator on my boat. Right? So when I'm running my boat, I'm going to have a high output alternator and external regulator. So when I'm running, I'm creating power. But sometimes I like to stay at anchor for 3 days, 4 days. The next thing I did is solar. In the sun, in the summer, I have a solar array on my boat that I can be at anchor for 4 months, don't need to plug in, don't need to move. My solar array will keep my boat and will meet all the demands of all power requirements. But what happens in the shoulder season, or if it's not sunny? Right? As I go more north, or if I go on the west coast of Vancouver Island, it's not as sunny as it is in Puget Sound or in these waterways. Georgia Strait, here Pacific Northwest, before you go mid-island, it's actually quite sunny here. But past that point, as you go to Alaska or the Broughtons or places where it's not as sunny, well, what are you going to do? A solar array is not that useful if it's not sunny. And that's where, and we boat in the wintertime as well, and that's where a methanol fuel cell is really handy. When we boat in the wintertime, and sometimes we're out boating for 2 weeks in the wintertime, the methanol fuel cell is in the background running my batteries and recharging my batteries, and I don't mind it running 24/7 because I can't hear it. I can't feel it. So a lot of people say, well, it's stupid because it doesn't output as fast as a conventional generator. Well, yeah, but I don't need to run it for a short amount of time. I can't hear it running. So I leave it running for 24 hours. It's just running in the background. And that's why I think a methanol fuel cell is worth considering. But again, you see, I made a decision for myself. A lot of people as boaters, if it's not good for me, it's not good for anyone. And that's where you get a lot of naysaying on the docks. It's crazy. It's so judgmental. I'm like, we're all boaters. Let's chill out. What's right for you is not right for me, and that's the beauty of why there's not a boat. Can you imagine if we were all stuck with one boat, every one of us? It would be horrible. There's literally tens of thousands of boats out there. Every one of us do something different. It made sense for me, but a methanol fuel cell is not a popular choice on the docks. I had a question up front. I'll come to you in the back. Yes, go ahead.
Can you use the AGMs and the Fireflies as a cranking?
The question is, can I use an AGM or a Firefly battery as a cranking battery? A Firefly battery is not a cranking battery. I tell boaters all the time, save your money, buy an AGM battery that is meant for cranking. North Star makes a really good one. It's nearly half the price of a Firefly battery. Remember, I'm a business, and I'm telling you, spend half the money somewhere else. So there's obviously no conflict of interest. And get a cranking AGM battery. North Star makes a great one. And you'll spend half the money. Firefly is a deep cycle battery. It can start, like, okay, if you have an engine and you've got a huge battery bank, yes, your house battery bank will start that engine because it's a huge battery bank, no problem. But if you're buying a dedicated starting battery and you're buying just a battery for starting your engine or 2 batteries to start your engine, you will not buy a Firefly battery. Buy a cranking North Star, like a big fan, AGM battery. Okay, another question? Oh, well, lots of questions. I'm going to start the room. I'm going to walk. Well, we'll make sure we answer. Yeah, go ahead. Pardon, can you speak louder?
For lithium, is there a minimum charge?
Yeah, that's a good question. Is there a minimum charge for lithium? I'm not aware that there is. With lithium, one of the main benefits of lithium, the question was, I should have repeated, is there a minimum rate of charge for lithium? One of the main advantages of lithium is the ability to charge really quickly. And so I've never encountered a low charge rate on a lithium battery bank. If anything, it's the opposite. We're trying to get as fast a charge rate as possible. But as a rule of thumb, I think 10% too, but I've never seen it. So I'm not aware of it. You see, and that's a good thing. The world that I'm in, even though I live it 24/7 and I do nothing else, I don't have all the answers. I really don't. You know, here's an example. That's a question that was asked yesterday, and I don't know. I will find out, but I don't know. I've always charged lithium at a higher rate of charge because it's one of its benefits. So I've never done like 5%. Never seen that. Generally, when you do lithium, you're going to be willing to stomach a lot of other things on your boat because you're not just changing the batteries. You're changing a bunch of other things. So generally, when we do that, we end up changing so much that we go with a pretty big charger. Question? Okay, in the back, and I'll walk.
How much is the price of fuel cell?
Yeah, so remember, I'm a Canadian, so don't hate. So my numbers are all Canadian. Fisheries Supplies here in Washington State sells them. The currency is always changing, so I'd have to adjust, but they sell 3 models. They sell a 80, which I've sold once, so that. And then the 2 other ones I sell almost equally, so they're like 50% because I sell never an 80. There's a 140 amp hour one a day and a 210 amp hour one a day. So I don't know what the prices would be, but probably, again, I'm ratios, maybe $4,000, 5,500. Doing the math in my head, yeah, maybe 5,500 and 4,000. But again, I'm thinking Canadian dollars, which doesn't mean a lot here. Okay? Question? All right, go ahead.
My understanding about lithium batteries is that you shouldn't store them at 100% charge rate. That while you're using it, it was great to take advantage of charging it up to 100%. So my question is, if you get a charger that's profiled for lithium and you're out on a cruise and you have a profile to charge up to 100% every day, then you go home when you put your boat in the trailer, put it in the garage, it's going to sit there for 6 months. Can do the chargers they make allow you to throw a switch or tell it to now don't keep it at 100%?
Yeah, I've never heard of that. So the question was, just short answer, the question was, I've heard that lithium batteries don't like to be stored at 100%. And what happens with a charger that charges your battery at 100%? I've never come across that. When we end up doing a lithium battery bank, we buy chargers or configure the charge profile to be custom to lithium. And I've never come across that at all. Now, remember, like when you buy an AGM battery or a lithium, every single AGM manufacturer wants a different charge profile, believe it or not. Same thing with lithium. Victron, Mastervolt, Lithionics, Xantrax, all of those manufacturers are sort of being quite specific on what they want. So we end up reading the data sheets and we end up programming the battery for what it needs. And we do a custom charge profile for that. Question? Yeah. So let me paraphrase your question. What I heard you say was, how is sulfation an issue on flooded lead acid batteries versus seal valve regulated and specifically AGM batteries? Sulfation is a real problem on all lead acid batteries, all of them. Firefly was able to, that's why Firefly is 10 times more. It's because of that carbon foam. They were almost able to negate that. That's why it's 12 times, 17 times. But a standard AGM battery and a flooded lead acid battery, sulfation is your #1 enemy for battery life. And for AGM, the issue is that you don't recharge your battery to 100% frequently. If you have an AGM battery that lives in a partial state of discharge, meaning you're a cruiser and you're recharging your battery to 85% and never to 100%, and you're living between the 50 or 30 to 85%, your battery will die prematurely if you have an AGM battery. It's one of the concerns for people that go off the hook literally their offshore power for extended periods of time, for like a year, 2 years, for months on end. If you have an AGM battery, you need a way to get that battery back to 100% commonly, like frequently. And if you don't, that battery will die prematurely. That's why when we've got boaters that are going offshore, I'll strongly recommend that they go to Firefly, because they're going to be living in a world where it's called partial state of discharge. They're never not hungry. They're always living in that sort of, they never get to 100, they never go down, but they're never back to 100. And if you're not back to the 100%, you're going to end up sulfating. Boaters that had flooded lead acid batteries would solve that problem by equalization, right? You can't equalize. No, you can't. It's strongly discouraged to equalize a AGM battery. I've read some people say you can do it, but you can't top off the electrolyte, right? An AGM battery you can't top off. So when you equalize, you're literally boiling the batteries at 16, 17 volts, and the cells are cracking like crazy, and you've got to measure the specific gravity of every cell, and you've got to top it off, and then you're doing that, and it's a full-on science experiment, and you're doing that, and you're shedding all this, literally you're undoing all that sulfation, and you're literally having now they'll come to the bottom of the battery box, right? And you're re-energizing, giving new life to the battery. But I've never sulfated on an AGM battery. I've read about people doing that. I would not recommend doing that. And so if you're living in a partial state of discharge for long periods of time, that's where, again, lithium don't have that problem, and Firefly, even they do. I mean, their battery life is 3,600 cycles, 4,700 cycles. I joke around, I say it's like a family heirloom. It's like if you live to 1,000 years old, it's not forever, but it's pretty damn close. It's 2 lifespans to Jesus. I mean, that's pretty much forever, right? So yeah, that's the answer on sulfation. Question in the back? Oh, 1 second. I'm going to move backwards. So sorry. Yes, gentleman in the black jacket.
Yeah, so one slide you showed that the alternator should be sized at least 10% capacity. So what happens then if you recharge the solar panels and the sizing of that is less than 10%?
So the question was, so you made a recommend, and I'm going to paraphrase and tell me if I got it. One of the slides I was showing the minimum rate of charge should be 10%, right, for an alternator or a charger. What if you recharge with solar? And solar is the only way you're going to recharge. Well, with solar, yeah, I mean, doing 10% of a rate of charge with solar, I mean, I'd love to do that array, and I've done a few. I did a 2,000 watt array last summer. It was awesome. But that's rare, right? I mean, 2,000 watt solar array, I mean, it was a 55-foot catamaran. I mean, that's just off the charts. So most of us are never going to get that minimum 10%. Now, the one advantage with solar is that you're actually not going deep. You know, in the daytime with a solar array, if you size a pretty decent solar array, you're not going to go to 30%. On my boat, like I barely go below 90% on my boat in the summer day months, because my solar array is giving me more power than I'm actually using most of the time. So my batteries are not cycling as deep. So I'm never going in a deep cycle where I'm at 30% and then the sun comes on and then I got to recharge all of it. So yes, it would be better to have a large solar array, yes, but yeah, I mean, how? Where are you going to put that? Unless you have a catamaran or a massive power boat with huge amount of canvas, you can't put that big of a solar array. The good news is your solar doesn't allow your batteries to go too low. So your battery life is going to win, right? Question? Yes, go ahead, sir.
So, bought a sailboat, 3 AGM batteries of a size I'm not sure. They are house batteries. I'm cranking a 3-cylinder diesel, which I can almost do with a handful of D cells. By doing that cranking, am I damaging the batteries, you know, the whole deep cycle versus cranking battery question? And the second thing is that, you know, I go out sailing for the day or two at a time. I run my engine more than I'd like to just because of where I sail. it's my batteries, and when it's on the slip, I've got my battery charger on, which is probably less than the 10%. I'm not letting those batteries get down at all. Am I doing a damage to those things by charging it with a charger that's less than 10%?
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to try to recap. That's my RAM memory got tested here. I feel like I'm in a test. Recite a poem. All right, I'm going to try to paraphrase the two questions. First question, and we're going to do the first one first, and I'm going to try to do the second one afterwards. All right, I'm being tested here in class. Okay, first question was, I've got an engine. It's not too big. You said it was three-cylinder, and you're starting that engine with deep cycle batteries. Am I hurting the batteries? Deep cycle batteries, it's actually the other way around. You're hurting your starter. Remember, a deep cycle battery cannot give a very high rate of discharge, current, in a short period of time. It just doesn't do it. So that means that your starter is experiencing low voltage, lower voltage than it should when you're starting it. So your starter will probably prematurely fail because of that. And yeah, the batteries are fine, they'll be fine, but they're giving lower voltage than you want to give to the starter. So it's the other way around. You want to have a starter battery start an engine because, windlasses, thrusters, starters, they don't die because they were badly manufactured and you're unlucky. They died because of low voltage, right? That's why they die. Low voltage kills all those motorized because what happens is as you lower the voltage, the amperage keeps going proportionally up for the voltage you lost. So you might have a windlass, if you've got a huge voltage drop at the windlass and your windlass or starter is now at 9 volts, the windlass will turn. It's not going to stop. There's not a digital control that says, hey, it's 9 volts, I'm checking out. This is not Star Trek. There's not a computer on your windlass telling too low voltage, by the way, helmsman, do something about it. It's like, I don't know what's going on, but they're asking me to turn. I got 9 volts, and proportionally, they're going to actually increase the amperage proportionally to make up for the voltage drop. And that's what's happening to your starter. Your starter is drawing more amps than it should when you're starting your starter from a deep cycle battery because you have a lower voltage. Okay? The other questions, question number 2, was paraphrasing. I've got a boat, a sailboat. I don't really use my batteries and deep cycle them too much. I don't think my charger's 10% of my battery bank. Am I hurting my batteries? If your batteries never go below 85% and you're always in the absorption stage, then yes, it doesn't matter. Because in absorption, you'll never give line rate of your charger. Your charger is not at maximum capacity. It's throttling back. It's like eating a 7-course meal. Course 5, 6, and 7 are not at the same gusto than course 1, 2, and 3. A battery at one point says, thanks so much, but I gotta slow down. So if you're above 80, 85%, you're in absorption. In absorption, the 10% rule doesn't matter. But if you go below that, and you're bulk charging and you go below 80%, then yes, you are damaging your batteries. Simple as that. Question in the back. I saw another question in the back. Yes, gentlemen. Yeah.
Lifeline batteries, they recommend equalizing once a year.
So question in the back was a manufacturer of battery called Lifeline recommend equalizing their batteries once a year. Yeah. So I'm going to walk you through a small exercise of what equalization looks like. And it's sort of like our heating habits that we hear from physicians or from all these other people. There's a lot of recommendations on this earth that are easy to say, but extremely hard to do. Okay? So let's walk through an equalization process and ask yourself, am I going to go through this process? First of all, when you equalize your battery, you need to absolutely be 100% sure, and I mean 100% doesn't mean you hope or you think. I want black and white that there is absolutely no loads on your battery other than your charger. That means bilge pumps, everything that runs on your boat, including lights, everything is turned off. Now, bad news here is that most of you have loads that bypass the switch, and you think that you turn something off, but things are still on. There's a lot of things on your boat, sorry to say, that are bypassing that switch, and you don't know what they are, and you're going to have to look for them. So first thing is, I want no loads, because you can't those loads can't see 17 volts, period. All loads need to be off. That's a pretty big dilemma, right? I mean, that's a big ask. All right, second, you need to have a battery charger that can output equalization, which means 16, 17 volts. Do you have one? Okay, now you have one. Prepare yourself. Bring lots of distilled water. You better have some serious eyewear because those cells are gonna pop. And I mean pop, I mean like it happened on my boat. My battery was at this table height. I looked at it from this height. It was a special moment. I was very unlucky. I literally got electrolyte in my eye at about a foot higher than the battery. I spent the next 30 minutes with my eyeball under the faucet, thinking that I was going to lose my vision, thinking, what's wrong with me? Why am I a boater? Couldn't I have done something else with my pastime and my career choices? What is wrong with me? So, wear eyewear. By the way, you don't have lights on your boat, so you better have a flashlight. Now, you need to access every single cell on those batteries, not just the ones that are accessible. I'm talking every single cell. So if you have 6 golf carts, that's 18 cells you're going to be inspecting the specific gravity for. And this is going to last for about 4 to 6 hours while the batteries are being charged, and it's going to stink. 16, 17 volts. And then you're done. That's the recommendation. I have never equalized a battery in my life, never will. I mean, honestly, I'm just gonna change batteries. At one point, it's risk reward. I'm like, I love money, but not that much. Not that much. And honestly, you should only equalize on a bench, so that means taking all the batteries off your boat, and if it's like my boat or any other boat, they're not accessible. You gotta hunch them off the companionway on a sailboat, bring them off the dock, bring them home, put them on a charger, and do that for what? What's a golf cart worth? At one point, my batteries, by the way, when I had flooded, lasted 10 years, and I never equalized. What, I needed 12, and I'm gonna equalize every 3 months? Not gonna happen. Yeah, but still, well, AGM is even worse, because then, I know that Lifeline says that, but did you know that an AGM battery you can't even top off? I personally have a huge adversity to equalization. That's a huge voltage. I don't do it. Just change the batteries. That's what I say. But it's an opinion, my opinion. I don't like it. I think it's too risky. Just simply too risky. Just change your batteries. They don't need to last forever. Question?
Yeah, sort of a multi-part question on the same topic. Does it exist where there's independent wiring harnesses for starters and deep cycle? The second part of that question is, do boat manufacturers do that, or is it an aftermarket modification?
So question was 3 parts. One is there a wiring harness that charges starter batteries and deep cycle batteries? The answer is absolutely not. Is that an option from a manufacturer? Categorically no. And is it something that happens aftermarket? Definitely. Yeah, definitely. No. Engine manufacturers don't care about those sort of problems. They're in the propulsion business. They just want to start an engine, recharge a battery, and that's enough to worry about. That's it. They're worrying about propulsion, period. When you have an engine and you want to share that charge, that alternator charge to multiple batteries, you either do that through battery combiners or battery isolators. I have those present. I have that as an engineer. I'm a geek, right? So I have a section for everything, and then you can go in that section and say, battery combiner. Oh, I'm wondering what that is. Click. Pictures, short video, long videos, medium videos, troubleshooting videos, articles, blogs, all on that topic. You have to solve that with a battery combiner or a battery isolator. That's how you share one alternator to multiple places. But there is no such thing as one engine doing that out of the box. That never happened, period. That is a black and white. Other question? All right. Listen, I want to thank everyone for being here, and before you go, I want to emphasize that Seattle Boat Show is asking for feedback. Here's a link. They're looking for surveys, how we're doing, how's the boat show doing, how are the seminars doing. So if you go on that Seattle Boat Show /seminar survey, leave your reviews, and we're curious to hear what you have to say. And I'm going to be in the back if anybody has further questions. So thank you everyone for being here.